What was your role under John Calipari? What were you doing in the front office at that point?
Everything. It was like basically like survival. I never see. Here's the thing: when I was at Marist, I wasn't a manager of a basketball team, and when I worked for
Yeah.
Cal for the 3 years, it was like it was a do-all. It was like his personal assistant. It was picking him up at the airport at I don't even know, midnight when he was coming back from Pittsburgh. It was going out to the Jets practice facility when he locked his keys in his car on a Sunday afternoon, and Bill Parcells, who was the coach at the time, looking at me and says, like, why are you doing this? And I was like, do I have any other choice but to come out here and get his car keys and drive his car home? It was basically everything and anything. I learned a ton from Cal working for him in that, that 3-year period.
So then at what point do you go from, like, were you interested in the salary cap stuff at that point, or how do you go from getting Calipari's car from the Jets practice to being the capologist?
2000, when we hired Rod Thorne, we were
Okay.
outsourcing everything. We had a legal team that was doing everything, but they weren't internal. They were the ones drawing up contracts. Rod came in and he's like, we didn't have anybody. So basically, I didn't have a law degree. I basically kind of took it on myself to learn how the cap worked, how to draw up contracts, how trades work. And that's kind of how my big start was back in, 24 years ago, as far as learning how the nuances of the CBA work.
Was that typical at that time, or did most teams have an internal team of lawyers that were drawing up contracts and somebody that was paying attention to the cap?
I think if it's nowadays, that's not the way to do it. That's not how it goes. I mean, nowadays you have 4 people who are like strategy, and you have lawyers who do it. I think it was how things worked in the 90s and even 2000 was more of kind of mom and pop organization here, where it was like, whether if you were an intern and if you got started that way, you basically kind of learned it internally. Some teams certainly had lawyers, but I think for us, we were so small. I mean, back then we had 15 people in our department. Now you have 80, right? Yeah. So it was basically, and I always tell people it was a lot, I don't want to say easier, but it was more accessible to break into sports back then because there was more opportunities for you to do so.
So who was then, like, looking at all the numbers for the Nets? I'm trying to think the Sam Cassell, Jimmy Jackson, Sean Bradley trade, like that was under Calipari. So, like, who's making sure? Is that just something that you're picking players and then sending it to the league and they say yes or no, or you have someone that's actually looking at all those numbers?
Well, listen, we didn't have the salary cap wasn't as complex in '97. I think that was when we made the trade, and Sean Bradley was part of that. And we didn't have the apron. We didn't have the first apron. We didn't have the second apron. It wasn't as complex. It was kind of like a group of us trying to figure out what the numbers and how the numbers worked. And that, that was a complex trade just because there were so many different moving parts here. So it wasn't as it is right now, where in 2024 and the Knicks and the Timberwolves are making a trade and you're worrying about the second apron and you're trying to make sure you're not taking back more money and you're trying to find a third team in Charlotte where you can send back more money and you have a team of 9 people who are working on this one trade. That's not how it was in 96 as far as how we went about doing business.